rejoicing when John Barleycorn was dead. John Barleycorn was dead.
Stop! John hobbled through a pile of leaves with his plastic boot. Eddie Frosch stood with his hands on the belt of his Peter Pan costume. Told you. Should have brought your crutches. John waved his silver ski gloves. Robots don't use crutches. Eddie's twin, Ethan, waved his own hands in frustration. Are you sure you're not a turtle or a sloth or something? Come on already, let's go! He was dressed all in black as Peter Pan's shadow, although the effect was ruined by an orange safety vest. He flitted ahead to tag the back of his friend Ray's leather jacket. I still can't believe you didn't dress up tonight. Jeez. Ray popped his collar. I could be Mad Max. Who cares? He pulled one of his dad's cigarettes from a crumpled pack and patted his pockets for a lighter. Ethan swooped around Nikki, careful to stay out of her striking range. And what are you dressed as? Your mom? Nikki nodded, bouncing her teased-out afro. I am a disco dancer, and yes, these are my mama's clothes. It's not my fault your folks have nothing cool in their closet. She and Ray laughed and walked ahead. John watched them pull away with a sigh. Their bags were empty, but they had time. They could stay out and walk the streets of Coventry Mills all night with nothing to fear. They'd made sure of that. He held up his map and bellowed, "More houses!" There were more unlit porches that year, more houses decorated with for sale signs, and fewer children skipping down the street. Each gap along the sidewalk, where a child should have been, revealed the old stone wall, slowly crumbling between the sleepy town and its restless fields. John kept his eye on the distant wink of a jack-o'-lantern, using it like a lighthouse to guide his friends to a lush yard overflowing with bountiful decorations. Ethan and Eddie raced to the porch, leaping over plastic skeletons and foam headstones. Ray and Nikki helped John up the stone steps. Nikki said, I heard trick-or-treating was supposed to be canceled. Nah, Ray gestured to the row of stately Victorian homes. The upper crusties love tradition. John said, I heard they tore up the petition at the neighborhood council meeting. The doorbell chimed repeatedly as the twins took turns. Of course it's safe out tonight, Ray flicked his cigarette. We saved the whole frickin' town. Coventry Mills should be throwing us a parade right now. John clenched his jaw. We promised we weren't gonna... Yeah. Ray rolled his eyes, bit another cigarette from his pack. The front door creaked open. Eddie and Ethan screamed, Trick or treat! An old woman in an orange sweatshirt, bedazzled with a black cat, formed a red lipstick circle in the air. Oh my, what darling little costumes! You must be the Frosch twins. They said, Yup, that's us, while jockeying for position. She squinted at Ray's cigarette and jacket. He said, Mad Max. The old woman frowned, but she dropped a homemade treat into his bag anyway. Nikki waited until the door closed to fish out the hunk of foil. I've got braces. I can't eat caramel apples or whatever this is. Anybody want to trade? Eddie knocked the lump back into her bag. No deals before the swap, and no peeking. Ethan rattled his own bag. There's barely nothing to swap. Jeez. At this point, I'd be happy for some bookmarks. He glared at John. You said they passed out full-size candy bars on this street. What gives? John studied his map. They always did before. Maybe they didn't buy candy this year because... He shut his mouth. They filed past a telephone pole with a flyer of a child's face that faded above the unanswered question, Have you seen me? Ray ripped it off and crumpled it in his fist. This is the thanks we get? Nasty leftovers? Those bastards should be giving us frickin' cash. They set that thing loose from the field, and it tried to kill all of us. Nikki didn't get her stitches out until last week. John looked around at the houses and hissed, Keep it down. Ray spiked the paper to the ground. Jesus, Johnny, look at your frickin' leg. John gave him a pale smile. I'm fine. We survived. Now can we please try to have some fun tonight? They finished the rest of the street in silence. begrudgingly accepting homemade treats from the old folks, until everyone had some wax paper, Tupperware, and twine. Thankfully, the street leading back to John's place was more fruitful. Every house had a big bowl of candy out with a sign that basically said, "Take what you want." The shortage of full-size candy bars was soon restored with a variety of assorted chocolate miniatures. The Frosh brothers read jokes from Laffy Taffy wrappers as everyone dragged their harvest up the hill. Nicky stole Ray's cigarettes and made him use Twizzlers. John hobbled along behind them, content to see his friend smile again. Ray pinched a nub of licorice and exhaled. "Happy Halloween, Johnny." "Yeah," John said. "It really is." Ray flicked the licorice. They wouldn't have believed us anyway. I mean, how could a bunch of dumb kids stop Jack Grist, the Harrow of Coventry Mills? He broke into a big sugary grin. "With a frickin' wood chipper, that's how." "Damn, Johnny, your plan was perf—" Eddie, Ethan, and Nicky turned and stared. "Sorry," Ray sighed, searching for his real cigarettes. "I'll shut up. It's just," Ethan yelled, "somebody get this guy a gobstopper, jeez." Everyone cracked up. John stopped near the end of his driveway. "Unless you guys want to carry me, I'd better call it a night." Eddie and Ethan gasped. "What about the swap?" "I called dibs on Mr. Bones' candy coffins. Good night." He waved and watched them go. The Frosh brothers pelted each other with gummy worms. Ray and Nicky held hands. John went inside, propped his foot on a pack of frozen peas, and then dumped his haul on the kitchen table. It poured forth with a pleasant swish of colorful, crinkly packaging. He gave the bag one last shake. A wad of aluminum foil fell out. John reluctantly peeled it open. It was a purple piece of withered meat. He recoiled and dropped it on the pile. "Oh, man." He tried to scoop it up with the foil. It twisted like a slug and rubbed itself on his candy. It was a severed tongue. John slammed a glass over the thing and then fumbled for the phone. He dialed Nicky, squirming as the phone rang slowly. She picked up. "Hey, we're still doing the swap if you—" "Get rid of the pieces," he blurted. "They're grist. They're all Jack Grist." A shriek shook John's earpiece. Eddie or Ethan, it was impossible to tell. Ray's voice cracked as he howled from another room. "Nicky, run!" John clamped the phone tighter, desperate to make sense of the muffled thuds, rips, and gurgles. "Nicky? Ray? Are you there?" The handset at Nicky's house rustled, as if pressed up to a patchwork of leather and straw. "We beat you!" John cried. "We destroyed you! We won!" The phone was silent, but the tongue rattled in the glass like dry laughter.
And they've hired men with the crabtree sticks to cut him skin from bone. And the miller he has served him worse than that. He ground in between two stones. He ground in between two stones. Fa la la la, it's a lovely day. Sing fa la la lay. Fa la la fa la la.
He's such a good egg. We're just bound to get by. Whatever's in store is good enough for the egg and I.
A Night for Devils. Bit cocked his arm to throw the egg, and paused when he felt it twitch.
"Do it!"
His friend yelled, already steps away, but Bit suddenly wasn't psyched on their Devil's Night revelry. They brought with them dozens of eggs on this unseasonably warm October night, and some toilet paper for good measure. All of their enemies, their mean teachers, schoolyard bullies, all would spend the better part of the next day and a significant amount of sanity pulling streamers out of trees and getting the crusted yolk and the white off their doors and cars. Bit had tempered the gunk with a measure of his own bitterness and anger. He was, generally speaking, a good if quiet kid, but somehow he had always cut the crap off every ill-meaning character in his path. What was worse was when the crap had turned to apathy. They couldn't even muster the energy to use his full humiliating nickname anymore, having shortened it out of pure boredom. At least he still had one friend, a friend currently stalking back to him, head on a swivel lest anyone discover them in the act. What gives? Bit struggled. I thought it moved. It twitched again and he dropped it on the as yet undead grass of his would-be final victim. Come on, we gotta go, the friend hissed. Bit picked the egg up again and held it out in front of the sickly green floodlight at the corner of the otherwise dark house. It was hard to tell, but it really seemed like the amorphous shadow inside moved. There's a chick in there, he stammered. In the window? His friend asked, eager and excited. In the egg, Bit said. Oh, who cares? But there's no chicks in eggs. Where do you think chicks come from, dude? But these are just eggs. Just eggs. Bit tried to really discern whether the egg indeed harbored life or whether it was just really late. He squinted at the shadow. Throw it, I want to go. Not if it's alive. You don't care about that. Remember that frog? Bit had killed that frog that one time. If you squeezed a frog, then dunked it and let go, it would just drown. He had meant to do it, did it on a dare. Kept him awake nights, though. The guilt, the horror, seeing that helpless, lifeless little body just floating there upside down, destroyed in the place it felt safest. He'd cry at random moments, his parents at a complete loss, and too busy to really dig into it. Put him in therapy for a good few months, and that sorta helped. But he never forgot it, that poor little frog. This is Greg Sven's house, Bit's friend said. The biggest jerk we know. He punched you in the face. He told everyone I crapped my pants in 6th grade. Throw it, or you're not my friend. Give me a different egg, Bit said. His friend flung another into his hands. Here, hurry! Bit checked this one. Movement, definitely. Where did you get these? Bit asked, hysterical. From the coop. Duh, I'm not gonna buy eggs. Horrified, Bit realized the depth of his transgression. Tension pressed his lungs against his rib cage, heart trying to force them through, the edges of his vision irised, matte black feathering towards the center. Had he stuck around the scene of his crimes? Had he seen the yolk and the white running down? Was it a childhood prank, or a scene of grisly horror? Bit turned in place. Should he go back? Should he go back and see? Could he save them? Did it matter? Forget this, his friend said, turning on his heel and starting down the street. Where are you going? Bit asked, stricken and desperate. Home. But we're going out tomorrow night, right? Whatever, his friend said, suddenly miles away. The egg shivered and made a cracking sound. A cracking sound! Bit looked for his friend, almost lost in the fog and the dark. His only friend. Wait! He screamed, and the figure in the distance turned, an amorphous shadow. Bit cried, and cocked his arm.
A bundle of love, facsimile of the egg and I.
There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. There ain't no grave gonna hold my body down. When they hear that trumpet sound, gonna get up.
The Sinful Dead. When Ford pulled up in my driveway and the Mexican guy in a fancy suit and a little slip of a woman with mirror sunglasses got out, I didn't need to see their badges to know they was feds. They showed 'em anyway, marshals. Mexican guy's name was Diaz. I forgot the woman's name. I didn't open the screen door. You attend the Berean Fellowship in town, asked Diaz. Yup, I said. Well, can we come in? Nope. All right. Well, we had a report of a shooting at the church, 2 dead. I wasn't afraid of being arrested. These days a murder charge was hard to make stick. The pastor, Sam Davies, and your wife, Mary. I didn't say nothing. I knew my rights. Looks like they were holding a funeral, said Diaz. You know anything about that? Nope. You have a son, Joshua. You know where he is right now? Is he at home? Can we speak to him? Which one you want me to answer first? Can we speak to Joshua? Nope. Is he here? I don't know where he is. He's not here somewhere in the house. Nope. He was quiet a minute. Maybe listening to see if Joshua made a sound. He didn't. You know I have the authority to search the premises for him. I know you think you do, I said. and I brought my Havoc Pro Hunter out from where it had been leaning in the doorframe. I didn't point it, but I let him know the business end could swing in his direction if need be. Him and his lady partner got stiff. I knew they wanted to go for their sidearms, and I wanted them to. "We can come back with more men," said Diaz. "Yep," I said. "Bring 'em. Bring all the men you got." "Let me talk to him, Alonzo," said the woman. Diaz looked like he wanted to fetch me a taste of his chimichanga, but he walked off back to the car. I knew how to say pussy in Mexican, I would have. "Your son's dead," the woman said. I didn't say nothing to her, just looked at myself in her sunglasses. I needed to shave, needed to sleep. "You know he'll come back," she said. "That's in God's hands," I said. "I'm a good Christian. I'm a hard-working American." When all this bullshit began, it was down in Mexico, of course, and the libtards who'd been crying about the wall and the poor immigrants got real quiet when the president sealed up the borders like he should have done all along. When they started talking about people dying and getting back up, we didn't believe it. The Mexican president, he said it was dead people trying to get across the border. Bunch of bullshit, we all figured. When the president ordered INS and the border guards to shoot him, well, we just figured it was about time. And yeah, the SJWs got their panties all in a twist about it and called for impeachment, lit candles and all that shit. They were crazy riots and protests, even worse than Black Lives Matter. We figured Antifa was going to hit the White House and the major cities any day and institute a communist socialist coup. But then the president, he come on the news and said, yeah, it really was dead people. They showed him on TV staggering around like drunks with them boiled egg eyes. Of course, then the Democrats, they said it was bullshit. And the president was just making it up to cover the so-called massacre he'd authorized down on the border. They said he was murdering innocent people just trying to better their lives. That's when I first knew it was true. I mean, if the left was denying it, well, it had to be. A lot of people said the rapture had come, but I seen them walking around on TV and pretty soon even a couple out along the highway into town, and they didn't look like nothing like they was supposed to. There weren't no souls in them bodies. The eyes are supposed to be windows to the soul, and there wasn't nothing in them. They didn't ascend up into heaven. They didn't amass at Megiddo. They just stumbled around, snarling like feral dogs, looking shittier every day. Then it come out that they were eating people, and that the people that died got up and ate people. When the dead walk, it's a hell of a time to be alive. I bought a shitload of new guns, paid out the ass because Lonnie at Gun Plaza told me the left was using the whole thing as an excuse to try to take them away, right when we needed them most. A bunch of new laws was coming down the pipe to leave us defenseless. I'm still paying Lonnie for my Pro Hunter. Then Pastor Davies, he explained to us that as Christians, we didn't have nothing to fear about. He'd got it down from the elders that it wasn't the rapture and that the righteous wasn't coming back to life. It was only those that had died full of sin. Atheists, and homos, Muslims, and trannies, and all their cuck allies. God had given them over to the devil they honored so much. Satan was passing their carcasses over to demons who possessed them and made them come back like wild, hungry animals. It wasn't the rapture. That was still coming, he told us. But this was the opener. The John the Baptist moment, like, for the big return of Jesus. Not quite the tribulation, but pretty damn close, like the undercard. Then come the terrible day we lost the president, God's only man. He'd been bit by one of them things right there in the White House, he and the First Lady. God bless them, they hadn't come back, though. The Vice President, he told us so. The left come out and said that he had, and that was why they went and had a closed casket at the funeral. They didn't want to afford that great man and his poor wife an ounce of dignity in this world. Who are the real fucking ghouls? So, when the president and the first lady didn't come back, that was how we knew Pastor Davies and the elders was right. It was only the bad people coming back, the sinners. So me and Mary and my son Joshua, we holed up in the house. We made sure nobody like that come around us. It got bad in town, and we ended up spending a lot of time in the church praying like Jews with lamb's blood on our doors. One time, Muslim fell in a turban and a beard. I think he worked down at the truck stop out on the interstate. He come around. I don't know what he was blabbering about, all excited, all bloodied up. I won't say who, but one of us shot him when he tried to bust his way into the church. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, he got up with them eyes like poached eggs, groaning and drooling down in his beard and snapping at everybody. And Pastor Davies said, "See? You bet your ass we saw. And we did that motherfucker like his kind did Daniel Pearl." Joshua got real upset about that. He cried at me that we'd murdered a man, and I had to take my son aside and set him straight. He turned into a real bleeding heart ever since he got back from that camp. I don't think they fixed him at all at that damn place, which sucks, because Mary and I spent a shit ton of money on it. So it was around that time they had the elections, and the new president was a goddamn Democrat, and he brought out all these biased science sons of bitches who said we had to burn the dead. Pastor Davy said this was sinful, and he told us all about Molech and how them Jews in the Old Testament had thrown their babies into the fire, and that we flat out couldn't do that. We had to keep to the old ways of burying, or there'd be nothing left to resurrect when Jesus come back around. That's what the force of the Antichrist wanted, to thin the ranks of the faithful in the battle to come. The Democrats, they closed down all the funeral parlors and made burying illegal. So Pastor Davies started the Burial Society, and me and a couple of guys joined it. One guy was Emmett, that guy that had run the funeral home, and another was Oscar, who could make coffins. And of course Pastor Davies read the book over the dead. As a pallbearer, I got a cut of the funeral money, but I wasn't doing it for that. My reward, that'll come later in heaven. Pastor Davies told me so. We didn't go around burying people who didn't believe. That would have been a waste of time. They'd just come back anyway. Pastor Davies, he said he had us nail the coffins of believers shut, so if the sinners dug themselves up, they couldn't feast on the sanctified flesh. When old Miss Stevens passed, we buried her right quick. And when Mary got in the parking lot of the grocery store and got sick and died, well, we went and got her body before the truck came around too. I didn't want to bury my wife so quick, and I insisted we have an open casket funeral at the church, but then she came back. I knew she'd fucked that John Morley down at the hardware store all them years ago, that cheating bitch. Well, like I said, Mary sat up in the coffin in the middle of the service. She bit Pastor Davies right under the chin, and he died, and then she got a hold of Joshua and bit him on the hand. I shot Mary in the eye with my Springfield, and it was sad, but I killed Pastor Davies when he come back too. Somebody had told me something about him years ago, and I didn't want to believe, but I guess they'd been telling the truth. Everybody ran out of the church straight away. I took Joshua home in the truck. He was crying and carrying on. I told him to man up, that it'd be okay, but deep down I knew it wouldn't. I knew he'd come back because of how he was. And when he died, I buried him in the backyard myself. I hadn't tamped the dirt on his grave before the two feds came to the door. Diaz and this little slip of a woman whose name I couldn't remember. "If you've got him in there," said the lady marshal, "he'll take a bite out of you and you'll be dead too. I'm in God's hands. I don't expect you to understand." "I'm a Christian too," she said. "I believe you're right. I believe God will protect us. Save us even in the end, but God won't stop a bullet once the gun's in your mouth." Before I could say anything, she turned around and walked off the porch back to the car. I heard her and that Mexican going back and forth, and I heard the radio. They sat in the car, idle and waiting for their damn backup. I shut the door and I double-locked it. I got a beer and I went in the backyard and I sat down. I used to try to teach Joshua baseball back here in the yard. He liked that, but when he hit the ball and I'd get it, he'd run all over the yard, giggling, avoiding me. I tried to explain to him about the baselines, but he just wanted me to chase him. Little silly-ass kid. Hair had been bright blonde then, like fresh straw, like Mary's. I'd had a head of hair like that when I was a kid too in old pictures, but that was before all this shit got a hold of him. His hair got darker over the years, like mine. I watched the bare spot of dirt in the grass, and I saw his fingers come up out, wriggling like night crawlers. My poor son. The thing that come up out the dirt wasn't him. It was just another citizen of hell. That's what Pastor Davies called them, citizens of hell on earth, the sinful dead. All the shit of this world had got into him. He'd fallen to all of it, to the agendas and the conspiracies and the machinations of the devil. He changed. I tried to help. I tried to put myself between him and all that bullshit like a father's supposed to, but it hadn't been enough. He sat up in his grave and blinked his wide eyes and got jerkily to his feet. He toddled at me, unsure of his legs, almost like the first time he walked to me. I put my pro hunter on the ground. Lonnie never would get his money. I won't come back. I know I won't come back, because I'm a good Christian. I'm in God's hands. I opened my arms to my son, and he came into them eager, like a little boy again.
We're going to try to sing for you now, talk about Jesus. Thank the Lord. The children's kindly getting a little hoarse from us singing so much, but this time we're going to sing, talk about Jesus.
Dancing may do this and that, and help you take off lots of fat, but I've no Surface tension. Gary clutched the heavy lead apron to his crotch and shivered. Goosebumps raced down the rolls of his exposed belly. The nurse he'd been chit-chatting with was now at the controls of the X-ray machine, hunkered down behind an additional wall for protection. She watched him through a narrow slot like a soldier awaiting a mushroom cloud. He looked around the sterile room for help. The only other people were on backlit sheets of X-ray film, stuck to the wall like atomic shadows. He never should have told the doctor about his headaches. "Hold still, please." The machine beeped. Pain ripped through Gary's torso, setting his insides ablaze. He dropped the lead apron and fell to his knees. The nurse rushed out and brought back the physician, who argued for further X-rays. Gary maintained the opposite position and won the debate by pulling on his clothes and leaving the clinic. When he got home, he flopped on the couch and cocooned his throbbing skull in pillows. He was resigned to another fruitless night of tossing and turning. But the aftermath of adrenaline brought on a crash that swept aside the bulwarks of his chronic insomnia. The nightmare was waiting. Gary had caught flickers of it over the last few years. Film frames exposed the stark, monochrome flashes that always bleached out by morning. Now, it unspooled before him in its entirety. He was crouching at the edge of a white field. The stony ground lay thick with scattered bones, a harvest left to rot. Some of those bones were his mate. The smaller bones were his offspring. The rest of the strewn remains belonged to the members of his tribe. Fleshy things flopped atop the desiccated wreckage, gumming dislocated jawbones and sucking rib cages for marrow. He searched for the gleam of their slimy, wet eyes. He would flee the instant he was spotted. He was light on his feet while the fleshy mound struggled to even move. Something moist slivered up his leg. A tumorous mass bulged from the mud, splitting open with a sticky, gibbering gash, while another orifice swallowed his ankle whole. His shin beneath the knee was bare, down to the shining white bone. Gary clawed free from the smothering pillows and bolted up on his couch. He waited for the nightmare to vanish, but the viscous feeling lingered. The sagging upholstery clung to him, his sweat and drool dampened collar constricted. He stumbled outside for a gulp of cool night air. Something was watching him. The street was empty, yet Gary could feel the eyes on him, incredibly close, gleaming wet globs watching to see what he would do. He ran. His pudgy body dragged him down with every step, but the ache in his shins brought the nightmare back into razor-sharp focus and spurred him on. He ran until his ribcage crackled, his hips creaked. It took an eruption of skull-splitting pain to slam the brakes on his panicked flight. Gary staggered, blinded by its blowtorch intensity. Nothing in the last 3 years of debilitating migraines had prepared him for this. He felt powerless, a mouse already swallowed by the shadow of a striking snake. Gary turned in terror to find a pair of bulbous, blood-tinged eyes protruding from a slick, veiny face. He lashed out, his knuckles connected with glass. It shattered and collapsed with a shriek of electronic alarm. Gary had smashed his reflection on the door of the clinic. He brought his bloody knuckles to his lips. His skin was shredded, with shards of glass still embedded in the meat of his forearm. But his fist tingled with satisfaction. Why had he come back? He stepped into the waiting room. The dark, empty clinic was eerie, scarier somehow than those appointed hours when he sat in the daylight waiting for his latest diagnosis. He followed his restless feet, curious to see which way they would lead him. Back to the X-ray room. Gary's skin trembled with the echo of that morning's agony. The machine had exposed something locked deep inside him. He went into the alcove where the nurse had hidden, expecting a complicated array of controls. It was just a monitor and keyboard. One click brought the computer out of sleep mode. The software was basic, with icons for camera, zoom, save, delete, and so on. He activated the X-ray machine and set a timer. No lead apron this time. He wanted the full dose. The machine beeped. A lightning bolt of pain burned through his nerves to the tip of their skeletal branches. The nightmare flared inside his eye sockets, stuttering backwards, revealing all that had come before. He looked down at his raw shin bone. Both of his feet had been skeletonized. He lay in a cavern deep within the earth, the bones of his hand entwined with those of his mate like ivory spiders. She turned her skull towards his, her smile immaculate from every angle. They were skeletons, and always had been, proud descendants of the mighty fossils that once ruled the earth. The skeletal tribe shunned the ocean, with its reeking mats of slime, but those corpulent clumps were not content to subsist on sunlight. They oozed out of the brine with greedy, gaping sacs for mouths, lungs, and stomachs. They multiplied and spread across the earth, reveling in an orgy of consumption. Their only weakness was gravity. The blubbery lumps required skeletons, and they were determined to claim them. Gary woke on the clinic floor. Deep voices were barking commands behind the glare of an oncoming flashlight. Gary gripped the jagged glass in his arm and ripped through the raw meat. His reward was a shining glimpse of bone, his inner self, his true self. He would escape this vulgar, squelching cage at last. The surging horde of moist, meaty hands overwhelmed him. Gary spent some time in a different clinic, one with restraints on the beds, as well as drugs potent enough to ease his migraines. Over time, they scrubbed the stubborn stains of the nightmare from his brain. The doctor released him with a proverbial pat on the butt, fresh and ready to get back in the game. It was amazing what a few good nights of sleep could do. Gary got up, made his bed, sidestepped the dusty scale, and grabbed his toothbrush. His smile leered in the mirror, stretching wide to reveal his captive skull.
When it gets too hot for comfort and you can't get ice cream cones, tain't no sin to take off your skin and dance around in your bones. When the lazy syncopation of the music softly moans, tain't no sin to take off your skin and dance around in your bones. Oh, tain't no sin to take off your skin, dance around in your bones. Children, have you ever met the Bogeyman before? No, of course you haven't, for you're much too good, I'm sure. Hush, 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 here comes the Bogeyman. Don't let him come too close to you, he'll catch you if he can. Hush, 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 here comes the Bogeyman. 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 Here comes the Bogeyman.